You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 30th of November. Marlene comes in third and the media ignores it. TV to die for, assisted suicide comedy coming from the BBC. UK millions fuel armed conflict. Fury has erupted over doctors receiving £64 per illegal immigrant. Catalan voters back secession parties in Spain. Germany to ban sex with animals after huge rise in farmyard pimping. 1,000 immigrants reach Italian shores in the last 2 weeks. Nick Griffin, MEP, from the belly of the beast. 12 men face execution by Libyan militia for allegedly being gay. Thought for the day, the label of fascist and what it entails today. And finally, the hairier the better, according to the Turks. UK news. In the elections in Rotherham, which took place yesterday, the results that were our Marlene guest came in third with 1,804 votes. Congratulations Marlene and all the hard workers and supporters that put in such a lot of time in Rotherham. Labour with Sarah Champion held the seat, vacated by Dennis McShane, who resigned after admitting fraud of over £7,500 worth of expenses. He had held the seat since 1994, so the result for Labour is not unexpected. UKIP came second after the beautifully timed UKIP fostering couple propaganda, and the British National Party came in right after. Down the list were the Respect, Lib Dems and other splinter groups. So why has the television on all channels totally ignored the BNP's result? More in my thought for the day on this one. The BBC, which has advocated legalisation of assisted suicide and last year televised a controversial documentary on the subject, is taking the issue to a new level with a sitcom focusing on the practice. According to a report from the UK's Christian Institute, the plot involves a group of friends who set up an assisted suicide business to help a terminally ill neighbour and to pay off gambling debts. The programme, described as a controversial comedy, will be called Way to Go and will air next year. A World at 8 reporter comments, "This is nothing less than conditioning, disguised as entertainment, to help the public accept the idea. I see a Soylent Green moment approaching." British aid to Rwanda is funding a dictator and worsening the misery of his victims, a former senior aide to the African state's president claimed last night. The £270 million worth of aid earmarked for the country over the next 3 years is sustaining a bag regime, said David Himbara, who was private secretary to President Paul Kagame until 2 years ago. Kagame's regime is alleged to be funding and arming a bloody rebellion in the neighbouring Democratic Republic of the Congo, in a conflict marked by the use of child soldiers and widespread rape and murder. Anger has been sparked over NHS managers giving GPs £64 per illegal immigrant to go on their books. Illegal immigrants who have not paid 1 penny towards their medical care will be able to pick up a doctor they like and then be treated as long as they have been in the area 24 hours. It applies even if they have no identification or address. Hypocrite Labour MP Frank Field has spoken out against the idea, but one main issue is clear. Since Labour gained power in 1997, some British cities and our capital are unrecognisable. Once illegal immigrants are registered, they can get free blood tests, healthcare and free prescription drugs, all on the British taxpayers' tab. European news. Germany is poised to reinstate an old law banning sex with animals after a sharp rise in incidents of bestiality and even the pimping of farm animals. The country's parliament is due to debate changes to the National Animal Protection Code this week, with the Agricultural Committee of the Bundestag pledging fines of £20,000 for the first offence. Bestiality dropped off the statute books as a crime in 1969, but in recent years incidents of it have mushroomed, along with websites promoting it. There are even erotic zoos for perverts to visit and abuse animals ranging from llamas to goats. Hans-Michel Goldman, chairman of the Agricultural Committee, said the government aimed to forbid using an animal for individual sexual acts and to outlaw people pimping creatures to others for sexual use. But pro-zoophilia campaign group Zeta, Zoophiles' Commitment to Tolerance and Enlightenment, vowed to challenge any ban on bestiality. Chairman Michael Keogh said, "Mere concepts of morality have no business being law." A world-to-date writer commented, "This is nothing short of disgusting. I know nothing is out of bounds to perverts, but consider the animals. I'm sure the last thing a goat wants is a hairy great German pounding away at it. There is one way to lessen the attraction. If caught, a bashing of the bloke's balls with a hammer should put him off for life, and that includes Michael Keogh." Barcelona. Separatist parties were the winners in Sunday's regional election in Catalonia, which saw the highest voter turnout ever in Spanish regional elections. The new parliament still favours a referendum on independence, something Madrid has said it will oppose. The governing centre-right Alliance Party, Convergencia i Unió, won 50 seats out of the 135 in the Catalan parliament, followed by the left-wing separatist party Esquerra Republicana with 21 seats. In total, the seats in the new parliament that favour the right to decide on independence from Spain is nearly 2/3, with 87 while 48 are against, only a slight change from before the election, 86 to 49. Italian Interior Minister Anna Maria Cancellieri said on Tuesday that about 1,000 immigrants had reached Italy's coast in the last 2 weeks. The majority of the immigrants came by boat from Libya, although they are not necessarily Libyan nationals. Many come from sub-Saharan countries or from the Horn of Africa and probably have the right to international protection, Cancellieri told the Senate's Human Rights Commission. I now hand you over to Nick Griffin, MEP.
There's good news and bad news out of Europe this week. The bad news is that our Spanish friends missed out on seats in the Catalan parliament. Despite widespread public concern over immigration, the election in the end turned on the question of Catalan independence. The real nationalists had a great deal of soft public sympathy. Both being there to make speeches at their final campaign rally, Jackie and I saw for ourselves how well Plataforma's leader, Josep Anglada, was recognised and received by ordinary shoppers in the busy centre of his hometown of Vic. But when it came to the actual poll, Plataforma was squeezed between the leftist independence movement and the conservative effort to maintain the unity of Spain. As a result, they emerged as the largest party not elected under the PR system, with far more votes than any other patriotic organisation in modern Spanish history, but still only had council seats. What are the winners? Just as with the Scottish National Party, or the Muslim candidate standing and thoroughly undemocratic English Democrats, or the BBC-hyped UKIP, the question Catalonia's phony civic nationalists should be forced to answer is this: what is the point of striving for the independence of a nation if the ethnic group that is the foundation stone of that nation is swamped and outbred in its own homeland? True nationalism always has been, and always must be, based on ethnicity. While individual outsiders may well integrate to the point at which the native population regard them as one of us, the overall factor that determines nationality is common ancestry, descent, blood, kinship, call it what you will, rather than mere geography and residence. This is not to imply any hostility to those who do not share that common ancestry. It is simply to make a stand for indigenous rights, to state a politically incorrect reality, and to make a principled position against the most destructive, insane, and dangerous utopian fantasy in the whole of human history. Any nationalist who thinks or pretends otherwise is a fake, and every internationalist who believes otherwise is a menace. In any remotely normal and healthy society, no one would have to say this, because it is self-evident. But, as I hope you already understand, we do not live in a remotely normal or healthy society, but in a dysfunctional and diseased totalitarianism that it is our duty to oppose, expose, and replace. Which brings me on to the good news out of Europe this week. I've just travelled back from a 2-day conference in Brussels with representatives of members of the Alliance of European National Movements. It was an intensive affair, a mixture of political big beasts and computer whiz-kids. Despite speaking different languages, political necessity and techie geek speak, as well as English, French, Hungarian, Polish, etc., in the end we thrashed out the technical and editorial decisions that had to be taken to launch an effective internet presence for our alliance. We made good progress and, as a direct result, from this time next week, you, and people like us all over Europe, should be able to keep a regular eye on the positive steps being made by nationalists to work together for the mutual benefit of our confederation of independent movements. Nationalists of Europe unite was the call from Jean-Marie Le Pen some years ago. Well, we're getting there. And we need to, because neither our nations nor the rotten old disorder to which we are the only real alternative have a lot of time left. The slow-motion train crash of the establishment's paedophilia scandal continued this week, with the police confirming that Liberal MP Cyril Smith effectively admitted to multiple cases of the physical and sexual abuse of little boys as young as 10, and that he would probably have been convicted if charged. This inevitably leads on to the questions that various people still alive and various institutions still functioning should be made to answer. Who ordered MI5 to bury the police file on Smith? Who took the decision to turn a blind eye? Which other high-level politicians, on top of Ted Heath, had a similar relationship with Smith's friend, Jimmy Savile? In all these interlocking cases and rings of abusers, a clear pattern is emerging of vulnerable children, mainly boys, being abused not only by men who were supposedly there to protect them, but also by well-connected figures from various different branches of the same rotten establishment tree. As the surviving victims, for many have committed suicide, begin to come forwards, they accuse Tory, Liberal and Labour politicians, senior police officers and figures from the entertainment industry, all of whom have been aided and abetted by a conspiracy of silence involving the entire political, law enforcement and media elite. The 1996 report from the Gillings inquiry into child abuse in North Wales, for example, was pulped as the boxes arrived from the printers. That was always known, but now it has also emerged that the inquiry was a handicapped farce right from the start. 3 truly shocking facts highlight the extent of the advanced cover-up. The inquiry was not allowed to advertise for possible witnesses. The North Wales police simply refused to take part, and 30 entire boxes of information given by the council to the police were withheld from the inquiry. Why? The words of an internal Clwyd Council report into the affair give us the all too likely answer. Quote, "There were numerous claims and suggestions that senior public figures, including the police and political figures, might have been involved in the abuse of young people." Unquote. How much longer can the multiple cover-ups continue? This week also saw the announcement by the BBC that the results of its own, very limited Pollard inquiry into the Savile scandal are also to be kept secret. Do these people have no shame? Of course not, but neither do they have much common sense, because the stench of corruption and cover-up by an incestuous clique of media and political elites is now so overpowering that even the very often very trusting and frankly rather slow great British public are waking up and smelling something very much worse than coffee. Which is why I've spent the first part of this week working on a new campaign, centred on an innovative and very hard-hitting leaflet, backed by a dedicated website section and launched in the December issue of Freedom, all exposing the shocking key aspects of the Westminster elite's corruption toilet and explaining what must be done to flush and disinfect it. The starting point, of course, must be to publish the long-suppressed Gillings report, to publish the evidence to the Culloden inquiry into the Dunblane massacre that was mysteriously locked away under Blair and Brown for 100 years, to publish the BBC's Pollard report, to unearth and publish the Smith file lost by MI5, and all the evidence gathered by the Metropolitan Police's Operation Ore. Then there needs to be a proper, truly independent and urgent inquiry into the handicapping and failure of all the inadequate, bought and paid for inquiry farces, not least the pitiful excuse per a report issued by the Children's Commissioner in an attempt to sweep the 30-year tolerance of Muslim grooming gangs back under the carpet. This will be the first time ever that all these strands have been drawn together in one devastating, coherent expose. It's going to be a great campaign, and it's going to be ready for you to join in and help very soon. One other thing is certain too. This campaign will be all the more effective for following hot on the heels of last night's stunning British National Party election comeback in Rotherham. Our tremendous candidate Marlene Guest made history by securing the first third place in a parliamentary by-election ever won by any British nationalist party. Our vote was comfortably more than that of the Conservatives and Lib Dems combined, and close to 3 times that of the vote-splitting phony patriots of the Muslim candidate-standing English Democrats. None of the other alphabet soup of no-hope nationalist grouplets out there even managed to stand, although the EDL tested the water with an unofficial candidate who came at the very bottom of the poll with just 29 votes. In my main speech at conference last month, I explained that, having recovered financially and organisationally, the next step on our road ahead was to re-establish our undisputed electoral dominance of the nationalist part of the political spectrum. Since UKIP are not nationalists at all, but rather an internationalist, pro-big business splinter from the Tory party, our comfortable deposit saving success in Rotherham last night means that we have already taken that step forward. As several self-styled experts on the far right have admitted ruefully on political analysis programmes today, they all got it badly wrong when they tried to write us off. Indeed, had it not been for Rotherham Labour's carefully choreographed UKIP adoption row and the BBC's now thoroughly indecent promotion of Nigel Farage, our vote in Rotherham would have been even higher. We still, of course, have a long way to go. In particular, we need to find a way to mobilise the people who agree with our policies but form the majority of the 67% who didn't bother to vote in Rotherham at all yesterday. 30 years ago, that town would have been a sea of red posters on election day. Having so many people not even vote may seem a problem at present, but it's a lot better than having them voting Labour as they used to. They're halfway to us already. We just need to modernise further our election machine, to make the collection of postal votes the core of everything we do, and keep plugging away to persuade more of them to take the final step. That day will come, and our bounce back in Rotherham has just brought it significantly closer.
Thank you, Nick. As ever, extremely interesting. World news. An extremist Libyan militia has captured 12 men who now face mutilation and execution for allegedly being gay. The militia stormed a private party in Ain Zara, a suburb of the capital Tripoli, late on Thursday night and took the men hostage. Pictures of the men with their hands up against the wall and their faces covered, as well as one of the man's back with a henna tattoo, have been posted on Facebook. One of the pictures was accompanied by the Quranic call, "There is no power but the power of Allah." Pakistani terrorist leader wounded in bomb attack while ordering a curry. Pakistani terrorist known as Maulvi Nazir has been wounded in an attack in a large bazaar in Wana, South Waziristan. Nazir, who was out in the bazaar making a telephone call and ordering a curry, was suddenly greeted by a suicide bomber on a motorcycle. The motorcyclist, a young boy, drove his motorcycle packed full of explosives straight into Nazir's parked jeep. The attack killed half a dozen people instantly and injured Nazir, who escaped and was taken by fellow terrorists. One nationalist reporter commented, "His cell phone was undamaged, but he was so shaken that he cancelled his curry order." Nazir is notorious for attacking British soldiers over the border in Afghanistan. It's about time he got a taste of his own medicine. A political science professor at Indiana's Butler University asks students to disregard their Americanness, maleness, whiteness, heterosexuality and middle-class status when writing and speaking in the classroom, a practice the school's arts and sciences dean defended as a way to negate students' inherent prejudices. The syllabus of the course at Butler, a small Midwestern liberal arts institution in Indianapolis, spells out that students should use inclusive language because it's a fundamental issue of social justice. Thought for the day: the label of fascist and what it entails in today's world. The word fascist in all its glory is, along with the title racist, a word that most people would not want to be called, even if it meant that the words paedophile or sodomite were to be substituted in its stead. I'm dealing today with the fascist word. Now in my opinion there's nothing new under God's sun, and I mean nothing. It has all been done and said and fought before, thousands of years before we were banging away on our computers and mobiles. The first nationalists were the Chinese centuries ago, the first colonialists were the Babylonians, the first imperialists were the Egyptian pharaohs, the first communist socialists were the Spartans, the first democrats were the Greeks, and the first power to think like fascists were the Romans. The first recorded people that razed cities to the ground and left no one alive, even children or animals, were the Jews under Joshua, who laid waste to vast swathes of land in the Old Testament. The Persians also had a world record in domination and war in history. So you see, fascism is not such a remote position to operate from, although according to the media today you might as well be sitting on a hill with a pair of horns and a rather large red tail. For the media, all who have nationalist inclinations and who see the misery and division that massive immigration, amongst other ills visited on our country, brings, we are all fascists and Nazis. Now I can understand their derisory term of fascist, which in fact means to me I am doing and thinking the right things, but Nazism? Come on, the Nazis, despite or because of what is written about them, were organised and the people almost 100% behind Adolf Hitler, even at the end, which, my friends, we would not have won had it not been for the Russian winter and the Americans. So stop kidding yourselves we did it by ourselves, as we did not. I was reading up on Germany during the World War II and was surprised to learn that during the fascist reign of the Third Reich, Hitler told all the schools and places of learning for youngsters that no history was to be taught unless it was German history. This incorporated the magnificence of German composers, musicians, artists, generals and you name it. In this way German children only accepted the Germanic way of life and success. Hitler promised that he could deliver and give to them to make their life better, and this better life lay in Germany and the defence and spread of Germanic culture. Now you can see why in this day and age no one country is allowed to promote its own people, whether in history or books or deeds. This is to prevent what is inevitable. If the world or powers that be flood Europe with immigrants and actually believe they are doing the right thing, the obvious backlash will be a veering to the right, because fascism demands loyalty to one country and one state and one people. As indeed does communism, but under a different and more dangerous banner. So to avoid the forthcoming rise in fascism, all our schools have been encouraged for many years to promote other cultures and religions in preparation for their inevitable landing on these shores and the shores of other European countries. This is the basis for the media hatred of the right and what they see as fascist. The media have to maintain, as do the police, the mantra of total ignorance over either printing the correct facts over right-wing parties or totally ignoring the wrongs against us in favour of the far left who perpetrate such evils. What would happen if the media gave us the full-page spreads on the evils of Muslim sexual grooming and gave credit to our Nick Griffin and the British National Party for spreading the word? What would happen if in schools there were lessons on the important and great contributions Great Britain made not to only the rest of the world but to its own people? What would happen if the media in the UK hyped up England and the English instead of putting them down? What would happen if television showed English plays and history without the inevitable black actors, who despite all the hype would not have been here at all? But of course our children and youngsters have not had the well-rounded education to make up their minds or to know better. They actually believe we are all a nation of immigrants and multi-ethnics and have been since the dawn of time. Thankfully I can still remember a London without shabby coloured and strange slitty-eyed people wandering around littering up the lovely old city. In this way common purpose have corrupted all the teachers, captains of industry, councils, parliament, doctors and just about anyone who has any standing at all in the community, because the indoctrination of common purpose is communist inspired, or at the very least anti-fascist. You would not have had an insidious organisation like this unless the Third Reich had got pretty near to winning, which it did. The powers that be, whether they be Judaic in origin or merely greedy, selfish, self-serving moneymakers, do not want any country to be as powerful as Germany was before the last war. They're sitting around somewhere, rather like God, thinking similarly to when Nimrod made the Tower of Babel, that every time a right-wing person or party gets too popular or powerful, they make every effort to decimate them. It is rather like divide and conquer, which is what God did to the people building the tower that would reach heaven. He made them all speak in different tongues, so man would never be as powerful as him. So we have the results in Rotherham, and I must say I'm very pleased. However, the media blanket over the British National Party results are, as always, just that, a blanket of nothingness. The absence of any form of reporting of our results over the media or in the media are pathetic. The only paper to print the full results, which does not include us as the others, is a local Rotherham paper. Now, if the Daily Mail had done a front page spread saying BNP comes third in Rotherham, rise of the far right, can you imagine the fear on the faces of certain people? I can, and it makes me feel warm and very fuzzy all over. This is the reason why the UAF, Love Not Hate and various other splinter nationalist groups are all in the communist pot and the common purpose pot, though they do not know it. Everyone needs someone to hate, and they, or what passes for the other human beings, have selected the biggest bugbear of the 20th century, the fascists. We are extraordinarily important because there is never a week passes without programmes on Hitler, pre-war and post-war Germany. There's rarely a show out of America that doesn't have an errant Nazi doctor wandering around, and there's never a programme from the BBC that doesn't have a racist or fascist angle, from the bad side of course. Even ITV are jumping on that bandwagon. I suppose they must think if enough people watch TV, the message must go home, that if you do not love your country, you do not love your neighbour unless he is black or whatever. You do not go to church, but you can convert to Islam. Do not go out and meet your own kind. You will be labelled a racist or worse. Never voice any opinion different to that of the general message of the media and schools. Certainly never encourage your child to fight back when bullied by a child of a different race. You might get sued. Never question what sort of meat you're eating or where it came from, and more or less all along those lines. In fact, common purpose has not quite yet done its job with the British population, especially in the Midlands and North. This result from Rotherham shows that. Marlene Guest, Our Lady candidate, stood in the parliamentary elections in 2010. She came fourth with 10% and the turnout was 59%. Yesterday she came third, but the overall turnout was down to 33.8%. So by my books she did better than in 2010. Now, Andrew Bronze and his cohorts will demean this result by pointing out that her percentage was 2% down. But we all know, don't we, Andrew, it only takes a few votes to lose, doesn't it? The British Democrats came in below, and on an aside, I wish they'd stop sending me letters as I'm not interested. UKIP only got what they did because of, in the local paper's words, UKIP's campaign in Rotherham was boosted by a row over a local couple who had their foster children removed by the Labour Council because they were UKIP members. As I said earlier this week, very well planned and executed, Nige. After all, they were only fostering, and who asks foster parents anything? They were not adopting. Hell, if they'd been BNP foster carers, they would have been shot. So continue to ignore the media and TV. Use your own brains and feelings, and perhaps we will not need the media or TV to take this country back and give our people what they really need. A country to care about and for. We can do it, and we will, or rather we must. If only to give our children the correct history lessons in the future. And finally, it just had to happen, didn't it? The celebrity culture has come to Turkey in the form of men getting moustache implants. Yup, you're hearing me correctly. A plastic surgeon in Istanbul, formerly Constantinople, Dr. Selahattin Tulane, says he's keeping more than busy doing 60 procedures each month using a technique called follicular unit extraction, in which clumps of hair are transplanted from other parts of the body under local anaesthetic. Most of these gentlemen are medical tourists from the Middle East between the ages of 30 and 50, who pay about $7,000 each, a US broadcaster reported. Apparently in Arab culture having a hairy physog has deep roots, and according to Saudi Arabian journalist Andrew Hammond, having a moustache was always a big thing ever since the Ottoman time, he said. Most Arab leaders have moustaches or some form of facial hair. I think culturally it suggests masculinity, wisdom and experience. It also conveys high social status in the Arab world. This presenter states, I have to say it, The door has been opened and in I go. Now we can rightfully say that when some Arabs open their mouth, they could be talking out of their arses. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and I and the team of Radio Britain and World at 8 wish you all a very warm and safe weekend.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 30th of November. Marlene comes in third and the media ignores it. TV to die for, assisted suicide comedy coming from the BBC. UK millions fuel armed conflict. Fury has erupted over doctors receiving £64 per illegal immigrant. Catalan voters back secession parties in Spain. Germany to ban sex with animals after huge rise in farmyard pimping. 1,000 immigrants reach Italian shores in the last 2 weeks. Nick Griffin, MEP, from the belly of the beast. 12 men face execution by Libyan militia for allegedly being gay. Thought for the day, the label of fascist and what it entails today. And finally, the hairier the better, according to the Turks. UK news. In the elections in Rotherham, which took place yesterday, the results that were our Marlene guest came in third, with see a Soylent Green moment approaching. British aid to Rwanda is funding a dictator and worsening the misery of his victims, a former senior aide to the African state's president claimed last night. The £270 million worth of aid earmarked for the country over the next 3 years is sustaining a bag regime, said David Himbara, who was private secretary to President Paul Kagame until 2 years ago. Kagame's regime is alleged to be funding and arming a bloody rebellion in the neighbouring Democratic Republic of the Congo, in a conflict marked by the use of child soldiers and widespread rape and murder. 1,804 votes. Congratulations Marlene and all the hard workers and supporters that put in such a lot of time in Rotherham. Labour with Sarah Champion held the seat, vacated by Dennis McShane, who resigned after admitting fraud of over £7,500 worth of expenses. He had held the seat since 1994, so the result for Labour is not unexpected. UKIP came second after the beautifully timed UKIP fostering couple propaganda, and the British National Party came in right after. Down the list were the Respect, Lib Dems and other splinter groups. So why has the television on all channels totally ignored the BNP's result? More in my thought for the day on this one. The BBC, which has advocated legalisation of assisted suicide and last year televised a controversial documentary on the subject, is taking the issue to a new level with a sitcom focusing on the practice. According to a report from the UK's Christian Institute, the plot involves a group of friends who set up an assisted suicide business to help a terminally ill neighbour and to pay off gambling debts. The programme, described as a controversial comedy, will be called Way to Go and will air next year. A World at 8 reporter comments, "This is nothing less than conditioning, disguised as entertainment, to help the public accept the idea.